Everyone. Thanks, Anna. So as previously mentioned, my name is Kyle Gonzalez. I'm the AT coordinator at the Access Center here in Pullman. Currently, I am sporting a somewhat trimmed beard. I have a red and gray plaid shirt and a background with Albert Einstein, who is a person who was diagnosed with dyslexia, with a quote that reads, "Once we accept our limits, we go beyond them." So today we're going to discuss on a very surface level digital accessibility 101. This could easily be a semester-long course. So please, if you have questions, let me know at the end or put them in the chat. I believe Carla is going to help me monitor that chat. So let's get this kicked off. And I hope everyone can see the PowerPoint screen. Okay. All right. All right. So the main topics for today, we're going to discuss assistive technology and digital accessibility, the fundamental principles of them. We're going to go over the Microsoft Accessibility Checker. We're going to talk a little bit about PDFs, web accessibility, and social media. We're going to briefly touch on inclusive presentations, and I will leave everyone with some resources to help you continue this journey of accessibility. So what is assistive technology? And I will probably refer to it simply as AT for the sake of time. AT is products, equipment, and systems that enhance learning, working, and daily living for persons with disabilities, as defined by the Assistive Technology Industry Association. AT helps increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities for these persons. Now, we can take that a step beyond and include everybody, not just persons with disabilities, especially in today's day and age where pretty much everything is digital. So AT devices range from low tech. The best example for that is a pencil grip. Many of you may be familiar with those. So good mental image there, or a magnifying glass, to high-tech items such as an iPad with a slew of apps and accessibility features, to home communication systems where a person maybe with a hearing aid has it wired into their doorbell to alert them that someone's at the door, or they can turn off their lights or turn on their TV. So it can get very complex. But in a nutshell, that's what AT is. So within that, you have digital accessibility. And this includes the accessibility of instructional materials, documents, media, and other information provided, and in our context, through WSU's telecommunication products, websites, online learning services, software systems, and information kiosks. So governance, just really quick, for the most part, at this point in time, only government websites, yes, including state institutions, are legally required to be accessible. So if you go to a private company's website and it's not accessible, then that's simply because they don't have to be, which is slightly unfortunate, but that's where we are. And this is governed by Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And the publishing agency that kind of gives out these guidelines is the World Wide Web Consortium, or WCAG. Currently, WSU is at 2.0. There is a new version of 2.1, which we'll touch on in a little bit later. And like I said, they are the main guidelines for the Section 508. So these guidelines, within them, there are 4 guiding principles, and this applies to everything that is digital. That is perceivable. So the information and user interface components must be presentable to users in a way that they can perceive. It has to be operable. So the interface components and navigation must be operable in more than one way, whether that's mouse, keyboard, voice commands, and it has to be understandable. So it has to be written in a language that is understandable to the user. And it has to be robust, enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of users. because you don't know who is going to be using it. All this content is made for not one particular person. So it has to be created in a way that as many people as possible can access it. And there are 3 levels of conformance, A being the lowest level and AAA being the highest. So where is WSU right now? WSU has an executive policy number 7, which is the Electronic and Information Technology Accessibility Policy. And as I mentioned, our current level of compliance is 2.0 AA, and we are actively and currently working towards 2.1, which was recently released. And we are also working towards system-wide consistent procedures, and there are committees and working groups, as I said, currently working on that. So 3 keys to remember when creating content, and that is just a blank, broad word for a reason, because content can be just about anything. Accessibility, usability, and inclusion. Those are the things you always want to keep in mind whenever you create anything. And also, it's very important to understand that they are not unique, but they do overlap. So accessibility means that people with disabilities can equally perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with your digital tools. It also means that they can contribute equally without barriers. And again, as I said, you're going to be provided with a lot of resources. One of them is WebAIM's Accessibility Introduction, and they do a really good job of going really into depth on this. Usability is about designing products to be effective, efficient, and satisfying. And usability includes user experience design, so how it's made, keeping in mind who is going to be using it and how and why as part of the design process. And this may include general aspects that impact everyone and do not disproportionately impact people with disabilities. Usability practice and research often does not sufficiently address the needs of people with disabilities. And you may learn a little bit more as to why as we go through this presentation. And inclusion. It's about diversity and ensuring involvement of everyone to the greatest extent possible. In some regions, this is also referred to as universal design or design for all. And it addresses a broad range of issues, including accessibility for people with disabilities, access to and quality of hardware, software, and unfortunately today still internet connectivity, computer literacy and skills, economic situation, people's education, geographic location, culture, age, and language. Again, these are all factors that need to be considered in the design, development, and implementation of content. So really quick, pop quiz, if anyone wants to throw in the chat, what is the difference between equity and equality? Give it a couple minutes. So Jenny Glass writes that equality, everyone the same, equity, everyone gets what they need. Yeah, spot on. I should probably let you take over from here, Jenny. So since we got a right answer, let's go ahead and jump back in. So equity versus equality. Just as Jenny mentioned, equality is everyone gets the same support. Equity is where everyone gets the customized support. And accessibility is the inequality is addressed and the barrier is removed. So to represent that, I have a 3-comic panel. And the panel on the left shows the 3 spectators on differing heights watching a soccer game from behind a wooden fence, standing on the same size box. This represents equality. In the middle panel, each spectator is on a box that allows them to see over the fence. And in the panel on the far right, the wooden fence is removed and replaced with a chain link, thus not requiring any boxes at all. Now, to go a step further beyond that would be universal design. And this is an approach to design products and environments to make them accessible to all people, both those with and without disabilities. So in terms of technology, that means design and development. The universal design of it must be done during design and development and not simply as an add-on feature. So where are we at on time? So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip playing this video. It is a Apple commercial, full disclosure, but it does a really good job of showing universal design and things being developed with that in mind. So I recommend you watch it once this gets sent out. So the fundamental principles of digital accessibility, now that we've kind of gone over all the background, we're going to touch on headings and styles, tables and table headers, color contrast, hyperlinks, alternative text for images, and captions and transcriptions. So built-in headings and styles. It's very important that you make all of your modification using the style features. And I'll show what exactly I mean by that here in a minute. And this includes heading for Word documents, line, paragraph, and spacing. So instead of hitting enter 4 or 5 times to create the space you want to use the built-in style features. Same thing with headings. You don't want to just make things bold and maybe in a different color or a different font or a different size. You want to use the actual headings style. Same thing goes for creating math content. It's very easy to go on the internet, snap a picture of something and throw it in. But you actually want to use the built-in plugins that come with Microsoft Word to actually create that content. And then for PowerPoints, you want to use templates that already exist and shapes and text boxes for anything you put on your slides. And in Adobe Acrobat, they refer to them as tools. So for those with Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, you'll have a repository of tools that you can use to create content in PDF, which not advisable, and we'll discuss why here later. So to continue on this, document headings can be customized. And the main reason for headings, number one, is for screen reader users. This is how they navigate documents. In many cases, users who use a screen reader do not use a mouse, and they simply navigate either with a keyboard or with an eye tracker or with voice command. So having proper headings created helps them navigate that document. And you want to have them in the proper order. So you have headings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, and you want to stay in that order on each page. You don't want to go from 1 to 4 to 3 in that order, because the screen reader will actually navigate from 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will put the content out of order to which you intended. So when we say style headings for Microsoft Office products, this is pretty much referring to the ribbon. So here I have the ribbon from Microsoft Word, the latest version for Mac, and also for PowerPoint. So as you can see within the Microsoft suite of programs, the layout and look and feel of them is very similar. Now, depending on what version you are using, it's going to look slightly different, but for the most part, this is what you will see. And what we refer to when we say style headings is the boxes sort of in the middle right of the ribbon, where it reads normal, no spacing, heading 1, 2, 3. Those are what you're going to want to use when you create section headings for your content. And again, you can customize those and have them preset to whatever fonts and colors you want simply by right-clicking and editing those. And then from here is where you're going to navigate, obviously, through your document. But when you're creating content, whether it be bullets or lists, or like I said, spacing, you're going to want to use these commands here. And then again, in PowerPoint, just to illustrate that the look and feel is the same. Tables. Tables are fun. So these you want to create, again, by navigating to the ribbon and choosing table. Very important, again, for navigation for certain users is to always use column and row headers. This allows, again, the screen reader to properly navigate that content. And if you're Using different colors, you want to make sure you have proper contrast, which we'll touch on next. And again, as you can see from the ribbon, you can navigate to table design and simply click a few boxes and your table is ready to go. So font and color contrast, this is very important pretty much for everyone, I would say. General guidelines is you want to use a font of 12 or 14 at the minimum. Some of the better fonts to use are what are commonly referred to as bottom heavy fonts, meaning that the bottom of the letter is either just as heavy or if not heavier, meaning slightly thicker than the rest of the font. You have pretty common ones: Arial, Tahoma, Calibri, Open Sans, and there's a custom font called Open Dyslexic, which you can have added to Microsoft Word. You can find a plugin online, and that is specifically designed for users who have dyslexia. You want to use as much contrast as possible between your text and your background. So for this presentation, I created it with black text and white background to provide the maximum amount of contrast. And also because a light background with a dark font is typically best when there is a lot of content on the screen or eye fatigue. Also very important, you don't want to use color as the only way to convey meaning because you may have a user who is colorblind. So having things in different colors may not mean anything to them. Also for any images that you may use, so say you have a yes or no response and you're using a red and a green box to indicate that, you may want to include a little image of a tick mark and an X on the respective boxes in case you do have users who are colorblind. So just little things like that. It may take a little bit more time, but it helps you convey your meaning in a more inclusive way. And again, bold, as I said, you don't want to use it for headings, but you can use it for content. And you want to avoid content within those headings. And you want to avoid using all caps, simply because screen readers will read that out as letter per letter and not the acronym or the word that you are trying to put in there. Italics, simply because it can look a little bit jumbled. I know I had some italics previously on a slide, but due to the size of the font and the style of the font, it was within an acceptable range. And again, underline, you don't want to use that to convey meaning because underline is reserved primarily for hyperlinks. So in the chat, if anyone wants to type out which of these they think is a good example of a hyperlink. And that'll give me a chance to catch up on chat, see if there's any questions. All right, so we got a couple of responses. We got Amazon, we got all of them. Purchase WSU, link student affairs, link student affairs. Jenny, you're welcome. Yes, order is important. And color and choice, yes. Perfect. So Carla says, purchase WSU merchandise, although that is vague. Yeah, oh, okay. So maybe that's a clarifying thing I should make. So Nicole mentioned that it's hard to tell with PowerPoint as we can't click. I don't mean that the link itself is viable. I just mean the text used to represent the hyperlink. Yes, Eric, the ones that are descriptive of where the link directs to. Yes, and that is the key point of this. So first, top left, you have wsu.edu. That is probably fine because it's nice and short. But let's go on to the next slide and we'll see exactly what meaningful hyperlink text means. So again, screen readers, And again, I refer to this because in the environment we're in, that's probably the tech you're going to run into the most. And it informs the reader or the user that a piece of text is a link, and it will actually say or read out the word link before reading the actual link. So you don't need to include the word link in your hyperlink. Otherwise, the user will hear link, link to, etc. And screen reader users typically navigate using either their keyboard or their eye tracker while skipping content. So they may go through and read something and then go back and skip from link to link. So you want to make sure that that the link conveys as concisely as possible what it links to. Now, as I mentioned, you can use the full URL if it is short. So wsu.edu, that's perfectly fine. The one we had on the previous slide of Amazon, you don't want to use that for the various obvious reason of the screen reader will actually say link https://www, so on and so forth. And you want to avoid using the same words for links that direct users to different locations. So on this slide, the purchase WSU merchandise link. Say it's a link promoting new gear, and you have that put in once for a new hoodie that is out, and then you use that exact same language for a link that links to a tailgating tent later on down the article. It can be confusing, again, when someone is navigating, so you want to avoid using the same phrase or words for that. And when using an image for a hyperlink, the alternative text can function as the link text. And when I send this PowerPoint out, you'll be able to kind of use some of what we talk about here in a minute to kind of go through and see that. And so when you click on that image of the Apple video, it will actually link you to that video. So with that in mind, alternative text, that is our next topic. And this relates to images, graphs, diagrams, maps, a few others, but those are the main ones. And they can all enhance learning, and sometimes they're the best way to convey information. So don't be scared off by them. Don't feel that it's too much work or not appropriate or just not worth it to use, because they can be the best way to get your message across. It's very easy to make them accessible. And the most important thing to keep in mind is context. And this will kind of guide and determine how you phrase your alternative text. And alternative text is simply text that you put in that is underlaid in the image that a screen reader user will actually hear read out to describe that image. So it should present the content, it should convey the function of the image, it should be, again, succinct, and it should use proper punctuation. So on this slide here is just as an example, I probably could have used periods at the end of each of this. Otherwise, it can kind of sound as a run-on. It won't do it with bullets in most screen readers, so that's why I usually don't put periods. But just an example, certain screen readers might just read on as one sentence, so always be mindful of that. If the image includes words on it, such as the promotional flyer or something like that, you want to include those words, or at least the important information, in your alt text description. So if it's an event, you want to make sure you include the date, time, and place. And you don't, again, like with hyperlinks, you don't want to include image of or similar wording in your alt text, because the screen reader is already going to prompt the user that that's what it is.
Kyle, Jenny had a question about describing images.
About describing images?
Or about images that she uses for her PowerPoint presentations.
Okay, yeah, so I hope that this slide kind of answers that question. If not, Jenny, let me know. But here we have some examples of alternative text. So again, in the chat, if you just want to punch in a 1, 2, or 3 as to which you think is the correct answer. And again, this is the text that you would input using a tool that we'll talk about here in a minute. And keep in mind, this is the text that a screen reader user will hear to describe the image to them when they come across it. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of twos. Seen a one. No threes. Yeah, that's good. Three is bad. All right. So, bit of a trick question. Example one is acceptable. It's perfectly fine to put that in. But to go a step above that would be example two. Not as concise, not as succinct, but again, it's still pretty short. And it gives a little bit more context, a little bit more of helping create that mental image. Yeah, Jenny, very good point. So three is pretty much what the computer generates. Yeah, and so computers aren't people, right? They don't know the context, and it also a lot depends on where the image is sourced from or how it's saved. It could pull that metadata and just throw that in as alt text. So you always want to go back and check that and put that in. So I've been talking a lot about all these things that you can do. The best way to learn how to use them is through the Microsoft Accessibility Checker. So if you take away one thing from today's presentation or you remember one thing, this is the one to remember. This will not only help you make your content more accessible that you create within Microsoft Office, but it will actually show you step by step how to fix it in case there is something wrong. So again, it's available on all Office products, including the web-based Office 365 and desktop versions. And it is very easy to use, super duper handy. Again, probably my favorite aspect of Microsoft Office. And it's going to be different on every version, meaning that you're going to find it in a different location. So it may be worth kind of taking some time to figure out where that is. In Microsoft web page has really good articles and content on step-by-steps of how to do that for each version. And those links will be in the resources at the end. So the accessibility checker. I have a couple examples here. This is for the latest version of Mac OS. So you would simply navigate to the gray bar at the top, select tools, and then select check accessibility. And on Windows and Office 365, it should just be a button under the review tab of the ribbon. For older versions on Windows, desktop versions, you'll probably have to go into File, and then there's just a button that looks almost the same, kind of in the middle of that page. See, we got a question from Jenny. If I was planning on cleaning up my old content for digital storage online, this Microsoft Checker would be a good thing to run. Yes, absolutely. As long as it's compatible with the new version, or it may have you update an old version or something created in an old version, update it to be compatible with the new one, and then you can run that checker. Yes, absolutely. Now, creating accessible PDFs. I'll let you know now that this can be a very contentious topic in the world of alternative media. So take all of this with a grain of salt. This is just best practice for the most part, and what most people would agree on. And Carla can correct me if I'm wrong, or support me if I'm right. But always create your content, whether it's in Word, PowerPoint, InDesign, it doesn't matter. Whatever you can use to create that content, you want to do it there first. You don't want to jump into Adobe and start making things within Adobe. The reason being is that it won't properly stylize things, especially with headings. And then you get into all kinds of trouble when you make, especially like a Word type document within PDF. So you want to ensure that the source file is fully accessible, again, by using that accessibility checker. And then you can then save it as a PDF or export it, whichever way you choose to do that. And then once you have your PDF created, if you are fortunate enough to have access to Adobe Acrobat Pro, you can use the check accessibility tool to ensure that it translated over properly. And then from within there, you can make hopefully some minor edits to make that as accessible as possible. And again, that can be an entire semester, and there are full-on certification courses for just PDF accessibility. So please check out those resources after this for more information on that. And then one thing I always ask myself is the PDF the best option? Can I just give it to somebody in a Word document? Obviously, there's going to be times where it's not. You may have something where you don't want the person to change that content. While there are ways to lock Word documents, it's super easy in a PDF to do. So always ask yourself, is it even necessary? Can I put it in HTML? So PDF might not always be the answer, even though it is commonly used. So just ask yourself that from time to time. You may find that PDF isn't necessarily the best option. And what I do in my daily work for students at the Access Center is provide digital books of paper-based books so students can better access them. And while most students choose to want PDF, there's actually a more accessible format that is called EPUB. So in many cases, again, PDF, not the right answer. So as I mentioned before, Adobe Tools, you can go in here. As you can see in the right-hand column at the bottom, there's an option for accessibility. You would simply click through that, run a check, and it'll come out with a report. Let's see. So you make these ideas, requirements to researchers, students, to mine, people are creating. Yeah, so that's a very good point. Yeah, Jenny, we can touch on that later if you'd like, a little bit more depth. So moving on to web accessibility, all the same fundamentals apply. Again, there's tons of trainings. WSU does have a required training on Skillsoft for anybody who wants to modify web content for a WSU web page. There's tons of third-party trainings out there as well. You have a few accessibility checkers out there that are easy to use. I included a few here. And basically these act as plugins on your browser. You would simply go to a web page, hit the plugin, and it'll run a scan in the background. And again, if you're creating web content or content that will be put on the website, always get with your marketing team. If you have any questions, they'll be able to help you with that. So presenting accessibly, whenever possible, you want to learn about your audience. You can usually use that or do that through a registration form and including something about requesting if anyone has an accommodation that they need fulfilled. Whenever possible, or if it's appropriate as requested, you can create a script of your presentation and you can make that available. When introducing yourself, as I hope I did a good enough job, you can describe yourself a little bit, and that just gives users who may not have video or who may not be able to see video a little bit better way to visualize you. And something I probably didn't do well today is speak slowly and clearly for those who may be reading lips, interpreting, or captioning. The presenter should always state their name whenever you switch between who speaks. Now, presenting with technology, which is what everybody's doing these days, whether that be Zoom or Teams or Google Meets, you want to always turn on your camera if possible when you speak. You want to face the camera as directly as possible. Again, you want to speak slowly to allow captioners and interpreters to follow. And utilizing automatic captions is a good secondary, and that can be done through automatic speech recognition captions, which is primarily used between PowerPoint and now Zoom. And these are auto-generated live captions during a presentation. However, it should not be your primary solution to fulfill an accommodation request, because as no doubt many of you have noticed, the accuracy isn't 100%. So if someone at your presentation is fully reliant on captions, they will miss some of the context or accurate information that you are providing simply because automatic captions are not 100% accurate. And when using videos in PowerPoint, you want to keep them as short as possible, and you want them to be user activated. You don't want to embed something that's just on a loop. Again, mostly for screen readers, that's going to cause all kind of havoc. And you want to use a version with captions, or again, provide an audio transcript. The best way to do that is finding the source file. So if you find something on YouTube, but it doesn't have captions, if it's from PBS, go to PBS's website, and they probably have a version with captions. So I mentioned captions and transcription, but what are they? So transcription is the process of converting speech or audio into a written text document. Applications for this include podcasts, interviews, and speeches. The downside to these is that it is not time encoded and therefore does not meet ADA requirements because a person is not able to easily navigate to a certain point in time of that speech or interview or so on. And captioning, very similar, but it is the process of providing time encoded text that synchronizes with the audio of a video. So again, whenever you're showing a video that is of the utmost importance to always include, there are tons of ways out there to caption a video if you create a video yourself. And again, check the source file, and you always want to check the accuracy of those captions provided. So a lot of times put up a video on YouTube and you let it auto caption. It's not going to be right. Make sure you go back in and edit those. So social media. Again, you always want to include image descriptions. And for each social media platform, there are different ways to do that, especially when adding advertisements. Like we've mentioned before, you want to include the important details. You want to make sure your video content has open or closed captions. A new thing that has come out recently is with hashtags. There's a method of hashtagging called camel case. And as you can see here, the C, or the first letter of each word, is capitalized. And that just helps the viewer more easily pick out each word in a hashtag. Emojis, you want to use those as sparingly as possible. And then just from a societal aspect, I guess you can look at it through, is you want to just avoid ableist language such as I stand with or insane and crazy. You want to remember that disability representation does matter in your posts. So you want to follow and uplift disability activists, writers, and artists as well. Doesn't hurt. And you want to avoid sharing or creating inspiration porn. Real quick, and Davi, feel free to add in the chat if I get this wrong. But inspiration porn is basically just idolizing someone with a disability or lifting them up simply because they do daily tasks despite their disability. And create trigger warnings. Yeah, so if you have a video that has a lot of flashing, make sure you put a warning before the video actually plays. Things like that. So I know we went through that super fast. So you're probably thinking to yourself, man, that was a lot. What do I do now? Well, start small, but start today. You know, like Jenny said, go back through your old presentations or documents and see how you can make those better. And explore the tools you already have and use. Again, most of us use Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook, Adobe. There are tons of other tools out there you can get, but I would start with what you have already. You probably have everything you need to get started and continue working. And you just simply have to make accessibility part of your creation process. Now, keep in mind, it is going to take you some extra time. It is going to slow you down at first. And even years into it, you're going to always run into something at some point that's going to be something new for you. So just be mindful of that extra time it's going to take. And again, consult your resources and ask questions. You know I'm giving this presentation today, but I am by no means an expert in this area. And I still consult various people and all of the resources that are included here in this presentation. And just a quick little plug, Global Accessibility Day, May 20th. It's just a day pretty much where accessibility is acknowledged. And they put out little challenges. So a popular one is go through a full workday without using your mouse or trackpad, and simply navigate everything with your keyboard, or turn on your screen reader, or simply use voice command to navigate through your day. I've done it the last couple of years, and I will say that I was nowhere near as productive that day as I usually am. But it's a fun little experiment to run, or something to immerse yourself in to help get a better perspective. So who do I contact? 4 different places here you can go. The Access Center, this is primarily for our students who have concerns in the classroom or living environment. So if you get any students approach you, send them to the Access Center. I'm the primary contact for students again, for accessible content. Also happy to answer any questions from any of y'all as well. Wendy Steele is going to be your primary contact for general questions about digital accessibility initiatives, and requesting captions for events or videos not related to a course. And of course, WCHRS for us employees. So if you feel that you need accommodations or you have questions about accommodations, HRS is your point of contact. And then real quick, like I said, a couple resource link pages. So I will be sure to include those when I send this out. Any questions?
Kyle, this is Jenny Glass over in Puyallup, and I just wanted to say thank you very much. I guess my main concern is that it's easy to forget this if you're not having it brought up to your mind all the time. And I was just curious. It's been a great year for WSU in terms of gripping our history, our inequities, and stuff like that. And I'm just curious what advocacy is going on to make sure that this is top in the mind of presenters, researchers, etc.
Yeah, that is a very good question, and something that the Access Center is doing all that we can to do. In particular, Davi Coleman, she is not only an access advisor, but our awareness coordinator. So everything that she does, she tries to put in a plug for this specifically, if not specifically addressing it. I know within the graduate school for their professional development initiatives, I think they have something on this topic. Again, Wendy Steele has a bunch of working groups and committees in place, and we're slowly we're taking our time, I should say, because there are a lot of little good things happening on different campuses. And I know Michelle Eccles over in Vancouver is doing a really good job. But Wendy is really focusing on how to bring all of those good things together and centralize that. So yes, so stay tuned. There are some good things coming down the pipeline, and yes, it is definitely being addressed.
Great, thank you, Kyle. Any other questions for Kyle? I thank you for sending out the PowerPoint. That was going to be one of my questions, if we could have access to that. It was great information. So thank you so much for being here. Is there any other questions or comments before we head out?